Hi again then guys, and welcome to another specific car review for Forza Motorsport 7 in particular, and this time we're taking a look in a similar way to the Bentley EXP Speed 8 from yesterday at a vehicle which has already featured on Forza Horizon 3 in particular, but is now a standard part of the game. The Honda NSX, or the Acura NSX, the newer shape machine, a very significant car for the performance side of the Honda or Acura brand, a vehicle which people have wanted for a long time, along with, of course, a newer Supra and a newer RX-7. So the question in particular, of course, is can this newer version of the NSX with hybrid tech, much higher weight than the NSX would usually have, and all that kind of additional modern advantage, but with some potential disadvantage, compare to the raw ability of the original? Because the NSX is a hugely respected car, Art and Senna was involved in its development, and although it wasn't necessarily hugely successful financially because of how expensive it was, now there's much more of a market for this kind of thing, because instead of making the NSX as a Porsche 911 rival, they just went full on and made it something that can take on Lamborghinis, Ferraris, GTRs straight out of the factory. Now with that being said, what do you get from this new NSX? Because the price is reasonably high. It's not ridiculous, but it's reasonably high. 225,000 credits. And the car class on this particular model is S. It sits at 736 PI, which again is reasonable. It's not too high, but it's certainly high for a road car. And you're looking at not necessarily insane power figures, 577 horsepower in particular, but the torque, thanks to the hybrid drivetrain, is 623 pound-feet. That's quite a bit to be working with, especially with all-wheel drive. Now the weight, as I mentioned earlier, is quite high. It's a lot higher than the old NSX was, at 1725 kilos. That's a lot. Even for a car like this with modern tech and all-wheel drive, that's still quite a bit. But as with some other heavier exotics, such as the McLaren P1, the LaFerrari, some others as well, the Porsche 918 as well, they are heavier than their counterparts were, but because of the tech put into them, especially with hybrid power, that kind of thing, they're actually faster anyway. Because even though modern tech does make cars heavier these days, it makes them so much better, especially through corners, that they end up still being quicker around the track. You can easily see that with something like a McLaren P1 or a 918 or a LaFerrari or those kind of machines. They show off that potential to the highest degree, whereas cars like this, in the case of this one, it's still extremely fast, but it's a slightly pared back degree. It's not quite as insane as those cars, but just like a Nissan GTR, this NSX has huge raw potential, because for 225 grand, I would say that this is 225 grand well spent. It's a good exotic. But with that considered, what's it actually like in practice? What's the acceleration like, the top end speed, and of course most notably, the handling? What's it like around a track? Well, the NSX was already a very high bar, not necessarily just in stock form, but when tuned, the NSX is usually one of the best street cars in Forza games around technical circuits, such as the full Nordschleife. So does this car carry that over? Well, to some degree, yeah, it kind of does. It's a fantastic rival for the Nissan R35, and to be fair, that car doesn't really have many natural rivals. It is technically the new Skyline, if you want to consider it that way, but all of the Skyline's rivals aren't around anymore. There's no Supra, there's no RX-7, and there was no NSX, so this car is very significant for the return, in effect, of those top-tier JDM models. Although they're not exactly JDM anymore, they're full-on exotics. So this car is very important in terms of the rivals for the Nissan, and on that level, it has a ton of potential. It makes a fantastic rival for the R35, and although the R35 is already extremely quick, this car can definitely bring the heat in a one-on-one match between the two. Because whereas the GTR has all of that raw ability, the NSX does make some slight changes in comparison. The centre of gravity is a little bit lower, the car is a little bit wider in comparison to its height, it has more of a traditional supercar stance, whereas the GTR is also a fairly tall vehicle in terms of not just the roof line, but the bonnet line and the trunk line as well. It's quite chunky. The NSX isn't, it's got that very sleek Ferrari or Lamborghini-esque shape. And it suits it well. The NSX was already like that originally. And on a slight side note, the NSX always felt more exotic than the others. The Skyline was essentially a high-performance version of a normal sedan. The Supra was engineered into more of an exotic, but started its life as more of a sports coupe. And the RX-7, of course, again, comes from very moderate sports car underpinnings, the FB, where it all began. It wasn't an extreme machine, it was just a good sports car. Whereas the NSX, right from the get-go, was a Porsche-level machine. This one, as I said earlier, brings that to a newer level. The handling is fantastic. I would say it has a perfect mix of ability and fun, because with an NSX, you pretty much expect it to be good through corners, so that's not really surprising. And that's kind of unfair to just expect that. It means that when it does deliver, it's not underwhelming, but you take it for granted to some degree, and this car really is good through corners. But at the same time, it has more of a playful attitude, I would say, than the older one had. The older NSX was very efficient at driving quickly, in a similar way to the Skylines, and in a similar way to how the GTR still is. This NSX, though, feels like it has that genuine infusion of Italian character and charisma to its handling and to the way it takes corners, and even to the way it drifts. It loves doing that kind of stuff. So overall, although this isn't necessarily as dominant as a GTR, it definitely has the potential to be. In the right hands, with the right tuning, and on a wide variety of tracks, this is a very, very capable car, and it's not only nice to see the NSX back, but it's nice to see it return with such force. This is a force to be reckoned with. So if you want to try out this newer model, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It is very good. And so that's it overall for this particular review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.